Paul, what constitutes driving under the influence or DUI, and what are the legal consequences if you're found guilty for that offense?
Most states have pretty tough DUI laws. There's some differences from state to state. I'll focus on Kentucky because that's where I'm at today, but I think this is probably true for most places. You've probably heard the term, point oh 0.08 or, 0.10. That's blood alcohol level. And under Kentucky, the presumptive intoxication level is point oh 0.08. So that means that if blood draw or under a breathalyzer test, if someone it registers point oh 0.08 or above, they were presumptively intoxicated. And there are ways to rebut that presumption. It's very difficult to do, particularly if there is a wreck or some sort of injury that's resulted from the incident giving rise to the DUI. But there are certainly situations where people can have those levels in their blood alcohol content and still not be intoxicated. But quite frankly, when they register point oh 0.08 or above, then the burden really shifts to them at that point to prove that they were not legally intoxicated at the time that they were pulled over or the time that there was a collision or something of that nature. The legal consequences for those found guilty of DUI are significant. There's usually a jail sentence that's associated with that. Frequently, in a lot of states, including Kentucky, for a first offense, that's typically probated, meaning people don't actually serve, that time, but they can if they have subsequent violations. There's heavy fines associated with it. It can be, hundreds of dollars, if not in thousands of dollars for first offenses. There are license suspensions that are going to be appropriate and will be mandated. There are requirements that people undergo education for alcohol awareness to make sure that they understand, what the repercussions are of driving while intoxicated.
What are some of the different ways that somebody could be injured by a drunk driver?
Your standard situation would be the drunk driver that hits another car and injures the driver and the passenger of that car or truck or whatever. And that's probably one of the more common ways. There's also the passengers that are in the vehicle driven by the drunk driver. People should not get in vehicles that are being driven by someone who's intoxicated. But unfortunately, it happens, and frequently they're injured or killed as a result of the driver being intoxicated and being reckless and careless. And then frequently, pedestrians are hit, and we see this all the time. It's really tragic. You'll have someone who's broke down on the side of an interstate, not much room on the shoulder. Maybe they're waiting for a tow truck. Maybe the tow truck driver is hooking their car up, and somebody crashes into them and injures or kills them on the highway. And all they were doing was, trying to get their car up and running again and get it out of the way. And those are frequent ways. Of course, there are other ways that intoxicated people generally can harm people. There's motorcycle wrecks. There's recreational vehicle wrecks, again causing injury to passengers, to other drivers, to pedestrians. The bottom line is uh, unfortunately, when drunk drivers are on the road, the law of averages says they will cause a catastrophic injury or death at some point, and we don't know when it'll happen, and we're all vulnerable when we're out on the roads on any given day.
If somebody is injured by a drunk driver in one of those ways that you just mentioned, what are some of the first things that they should do?
Unfortunately, typically people are catastrophically injured, and if somebody in the situation that I described, where they're hit by a car on the interstate while they're waiting for their car to be hooked up to a tow truck, they're going to receive significant medical care. So under Kentucky law, we have a bit of a time. We have a couple of years to be able to pursue and investigate a claim. You obviously have a claim against the intoxicated driver. I mean, that's easy, and it's one that quite frankly people would win almost 100% of the time. But at some point, we want to figure out where that person was drinking, how did they become intoxicated, because there's always a possibility that there's somebody else that can be held accountable for causing a DUI collision. And under Kentucky law, and almost all states have something similar, we have what are called dram shop laws. And a dram shop is basically a professional bar, restaurant, any public place that sells liquor, alcohol for money, and they all have responsibilities under the law to not overserve people, to not serve visibly intoxicated people, obviously intoxicated people. And so one of the first things that people should do once they hopefully begin their recovery from their injury, or their families, when the families begin to recover from whatever occurred, is they need to consult with a lawyer. You're not going to get any of the answers to those questions on your own. I mean, occasionally the drunk driver, if they survive the crash, occasionally they'll tell the police, "Oh, I was drinking at this restaurant down the street," and sometimes you get that kind of information, and it can help kickstart. But frequently you don't.
What are some of the ways that an experienced personal injury lawyer like yourself can help somebody who's been injured by a drunk driver?
First, we're certainly going to try to get as much information as we can from the driver. Typically the driver will be represented by an attorney. Sometimes they're not. But, we want to see if the driver and the driver's attorney will give us information as to where they had been drinking. So that's one thing we do. We collect all of the police reports. If there happened to be an accident reconstruction, sometimes state police departments will do accident reconstructions on state highways. We want to collect all that information. We want to collect any investigations that are being conducted by the police, because obviously a crime's been committed. They're going to charge the drunk driver with DUI and a whole litany of offenses for causing the collision. So we want to get all that information, because a lot of maybe what we need to do to figure out where the person had been drinking and how much they drank may have already been done by the police. But the police won't just give that to anybody. And it takes some time and some hoops to jump through in order to get that information. There's information you can get through open records request. There's information that's protected from dissemination in the open records request. Once we get some idea of where the person was drinking, then we start scouring around for video. Video is very important. I hate to tell everybody, but you're videoed all the time, whether you know it or not. You're videoed on the sidewalks, you're videoed in establishments, you're videoed on the highways. There are cameras everywhere. We try to identify where those cameras are, see if we can find any information at all, concerning all of the parties that are at issue. We want to see, get information on our clients, see if we can kind of reconstruct where they had been and what they had done. We want to try to reconstruct what the defendant, the driver, has done. We want to notify any possibly at fault parties that we're conducting an investigation. We send letters to them and say, don't destroy anything. Don't get rid of the videotape. Don't get rid of credit card receipts. Don't get rid of anything and everything that could be associated with that night. And if they do, and we end up filing a lawsuit, that can have negative repercussions for them if there are things that would have helped us prove our case that they got rid of. And it's 50-50. Sometimes they do. They just take my letter, wad it up, throw it in the trash, and say, come and get us. Other times, yeah, they save the stuff and we get it. And sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's neutral.